It's that time. The NFL playoffs are here. We've been waiting for it all season long, and I've teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official partner of the NFL, who's kicking things off with a huge offer. Throughout the playoffs, all new customers, that's all new customers, will get $200 in bonus bets instantly when they place their first $5 wager on anything. Get in on the action this weekend by downloading the DraftKings app, and don't forget to use my promo code 365sports. That's right. Customers who bet $5 will get $200 in bonus bets instantly. But you say, Paul, I signed up for the DraftKings app the first time you told me to. Well, guess what? If you've already signed up for it, like I have, you get a no sweat bet, and that's if you get a bonus bet back if your same game parlay does not hit. Max limits do apply. And if sports betting is not available in your area, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with the DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the chance to win cash prizes. I've done that as well. Love it, love it, love it. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code 365sports. Bet $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code 365sports only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
James Crepea covers Oregon for the Oregonian. Been a busy week with the Dan Lanning news, of course, with also what's going on with Alabama, now with Kalen DeBoer, his thoughts about what the Huskies should do. James, with Craig and Paul, I'm David Smoke. James, thanks for your time. It's been a while. What was the reaction when Dan Lanning said he was coming back?
Well, I think obviously for a lot of fans, jubilation, excitement, I would say to a certain degree, validation even. And I say validation because validation in their belief in him, because he said these things before, but before it wasn't Alabama. So this was really obviously the biggest test. Yes, Texas A&M was obviously earlier in the year, but Auburn or A&M had interest, and he shot them down. Frankly, he shot Auburn down, I think, before they even had a chance to pick up the phone. But with Alabama, it's a conversation starter, and it's a different situation for nearly everybody. So for him to once again, remain steadfast and stay here, whether there was or wasn't ever communication, an offer, an initial contact, or anything, is not even the point. It's to come out and say so emphatically, and to do it in the fashion that he did, where he turns it into a recruiting win. Not only, hey, am I staying? Hey, if you're a player anywhere else and you're thinking you're worried about your coach leaving for a better job, come play for us. That's a very different, where have you seen that before? Particularly from a West Coast school. So that's where I say there's excitement and all those things, which they felt before when Lanning has certainly had his name connected to other jobs. And by the way, all these connections are from people like us and people on the outside. It's never Dan or anybody close to Dan necessarily being the culprit behind any of that. Be that all as it may. Yeah, it's that kind of excitement from fans, and then you compound it with a week that began where they had to watch a national champion, their rival was playing a national championship game and hope that they didn't win. And then turn it around to, is their head coach going to leave? No, he's not leaving. And now that rival's head coach is leaving. It's been quite the week for Oregon fans.
James, with the rival leaving, with Kalen DeBoer going to Alabama, what do you think that UW does to replace him? And again, they have to kind of swing a little bigger maybe than they would have in past years because they're moving to the Big Ten now. And we just talked about Dan Lanning has said, you're going to have to pry me out of here, over my cold dead body. It appears that's how much he loves being at Oregon.
Well, it's a tough spot for a lot of ways. Forget about just the rivalry you have to play annually, or even moving to the Big Ten for that matter, and the more difficult schedule that will come with that. Everybody in the league can now say that. The Big Ten West, anyone in that division, used to have a far easier existence than they're about to. anyone, even if they were already in the league, it's about to change. Now, the things that I think make it just unique and more challenging for any coach going in there is the roster situation. Look, Kalen DeBoer inherited some talent that was still there. Not a lot, to be clear, but he inherited some. And obviously they added Penix, and off and away they went. But there was still, particularly on the defensive side in the front seven, there was still a good amount of talent there. Well, in his 2 years there, that staff didn't recruit worth a lick. So whoever takes over, whether it be someone internally or whether it be an outsider, they're going to have to bring it, if it is an outsider in particular, they're going to have to hope to be able to raid their existing situation and bring people with them. Because it's not just a matter of, oh, you have to replace Michael Penix or multiple receivers or even multiple defenders. That is not a reload situation at all. So just from whoever it is, they're facing a difficult situation combined with, yes, a more daunting and challenging schedule and everything else in the Big Ten. Oh, and combined with Washington financially, even with moving to the Big Ten, is in a relatively similar position to what it was in the Pac-12, being that it's taking the half share for the next 5-6 years. They're in the worst debt situation of not just the 4 West Coast schools. I think they're in the worst debt situation of nearly anyone in the Power 4 or really the Power 2 nowadays. They're in a tough spot. So it's not just a matter of, oh, well, even if you did that, even if you did that, even if you got money, okay, sooner or later, the money does, it's finite. Maybe you don't, even if you do all those things, even if you get the personnel figured out, maybe you don't have the all-star staff that you want. Sooner or later, there are limits there. So that, to get to the base of your question, though, as to who, where should they go, what should they do? And far be it for the Oregon beat writer to be weighing in. I don't want to be creating headlines or annoying my audience on any of this, but I can tweet it out. I mean, if I were Troy Dannon, the Washington AD, who's only been there for a couple of months, now he finds himself in a tough spot. If Ryan Grubb, if you can keep him, if you can, I'm sure Kalen DeBoer is going to want to bring him to Tuscaloosa, but if you can keep your offensive coordinator and promote from within, there's the continuity part, but again, you still have to solve the personnel part. If you can manage to pry Jed Fish away, that's a guy who has the talent that he has, looks like a team who could compete, maybe even be the favorite in the Big 12. But if he could take the top 10 guys with him, that might be attractive if you have to go to the outside. After that, I think somebody like Barry Odom and what he did at UNLV, obviously very, very quickly. And I don't think his entire tenure at Mizzou was exactly an abject failure. I think there were some points in there where it was okay, but he's clearly shown both as a coordinator and now as a head coach again that he's still a pretty good coach. And I mentioned Kenny Dillingham because, look, this is one of the top offensive coordinators in the country. I know he just spent his first year as a head coach at his alma mater, but he's beginning to build something there. And if you want to go outside and you want to go young and recruiting and offense, that's somebody who I think would be worth a look as well. And like I say, that's just some of them. Everybody's going to mention, the Kansas and Kansas State coaches with, Leipold and Kleiman. I understand, but those would be the 4 to 6 names. But I'd start with Grubb because he's already in the building.
James, from an Oregon perspective, it seems like they've been on fire in the portal. I mean, going and grabbing Dylan Gabriel, grabbing Dante Moore, various others. And then today you get Evan Stewart, plus the Lanning announcement just yesterday. I mean, and then all that has unfolded with Washington ever since Monday night. It's hard to imagine a better week for the Ducks other than them playing for the national title. But can you just kind of, speak to, whatever the momentum feels like up in Eugene, Oregon right now? Is there a sense that, even though I know Phil Knight and various others have invested deeply over the years, but this is a time where they're really putting all the chips in the middle of the table, or am I reading that wrong?
I mean, they're certainly in a pretty, pretty darn good spot, given all the things that you laid out and like we talked about. So for a week where, the season's been over for them for 11 days, for a week when no one was practicing or playing, they had an awfully good week. That said, wins in the offseason are nice. Don't get me wrong. They're real nice. They can set you up for the next year. But there's still a lot of time. They could find themselves in a really nice spot right now today at the quarterback position, at the coaching position, at any number of things. They're going to be absolutely a top 10, maybe top 5 team entering the season next season. But the job ain't finished on January 12th. There's still holes. There are still areas that this team can be better, significantly better. If they're going to try to be not just one of the 12 teams in the newly expanded playoff, but to be a team who either hosts in the first round or preferably, from their perspective, wins the Big Ten and has a first round bye and is one of those 4 teams, who doesn't get to play in the first round. If you're going to be at that area of the table, like you're talking about, you're committing that kind of resources. You find yourself in this position. You have to be at that level of elite. They, any number of things. You can't have glaring weaknesses. And they had a couple of areas that they left themselves susceptible and vulnerable, and that's what cost them 2 games to Washington in the season. And that's probably cost them a conference title and a playoff spot. Would it in a 12-team playoff? No, but the rest of the schedule will be a little bit more difficult. So there are areas, particularly in the secondary, where they've already begun to improve a little bit, but I think they could still look to. So like I said, they find themselves in an awfully nice spot for a multitude of reasons, but there's no resting around here certainly for the staff, but in terms of fans and everything, yeah, like I say, they're absolutely giddy with how the week has gone.
How did they get Dillon Gabriel and then on top of that, Dante Moore?
I think Moore laid out shortly after entering the portal, and I believe spoke to one of the recruiting outlets, saying that he wanted to be developed, and maybe as appreciative as he was for the opportunity to play immediately as a true freshman, that things weren't exactly the smoothest. So how do you get Dillon Gabriel? Well, sure sounded like Oklahoma, depending on what you listen to from Brent Venables there, it sure sounded like that was kind of like they kind of expected Dillon to probably go to the NFL, I believe is what Brent had said, if I'm quoting him correctly, that they expected him to move on after this year regardless. All right, well, they're moving on, and they feel like they've got a young guy in Jackson Arnold they want to go forth with. So Gabriel's available. Probably there's a top transfer quarterback available. You have a 1-year premier player in that position. How do you get more to come along when you're doing that? Well, if you say you want to be developed between a quarterback and Dillon Gabriel, who, from what I've read, I've not had a chance to talk to the young man just yet, but from what I've read from his time, particularly at Oklahoma, was a heck of a teammate to his fellow quarterbacks, and a coaching staff who just had, by any metric in any category, either the number 1 or number 2 offense in the country in every single statistic that makes a difference. Sounds like an awfully nice spot. And there'll be any number of games where Dante Moore can still play 4 regular season games, including potentially back home in Michigan, and play significant time, may get an opportunity if Oregon handles business with Dillon Gabriel. And to say nothing of, and everybody from the outside can project and say, well, obviously Gabriel's going to be the starter, Moore's the long term. And I'm not naive enough to suggest otherwise. But we're all on the outside. I don't think, Dante Moore is entering it immediately thinking in those terms. He might be. Or he could say, what's the worst thing that could happen? I could compete and be the backup, which I plan to be anyway. Okay. Again, if he wants to be developed and wants it, he's got a teammate, like I say, who by all accounts sounds like a guy who would assist the younger quarterback, particularly since he's not worried about losing the starting job potentially, and a coaching staff who just had a Heisman finalist at quarterback.
James Crepea, the Oregonian, with us on 365 Sports.
Of the guys that Oregon has pulled out of the portal, which do you think, and they've had several home runs, but which do you think is the biggest so far? Non-quarterback.
Non-quarterback.
Yeah.
I was going to say, because, by default, you almost have to go with Gabriel in that sense. After that, it's a smaller list, to be fair, so far. And Evan Stewart is certainly significant. I think that Cam Alexander of UTSA could have a chance. I haven't, had a chance to go back and look at, every which clip of film, and ultimately some of it, the caliber of competition's hard to evaluate. But seeing some of the statistics and metrics of how he was graded, I think he has a real chance to be a significant player, again, at a corner position where this team needed to improve significantly at cornerback. Now, they added Kobe Savage from Kansas State as well, so I would pick one of those two because they absolutely needed a corner and a safety, and frankly, I think they probably need more than one of each at this point to fill some spots. But I think Alexander is the one where he might have the most significant impact, but in terms of who might have the biggest statistical contributions and come across to those on the outside who don't watch them every week is the guy who's like, wow, outside of Dylan Gabriel, this guy was what an impact player. That could be Savage, but I wouldn't look past Alexander because Savage might get the stats just because he's at safety, but Alexander could have the chance to be, either the number 1 or number 2 cornerback on this team. They've got some talent, don't get me wrong, but their problem at corner was that, their number 1 corner, who was a senior who graduated and is off to the league, he got hurt in both of those Washington losses and played half the season with a shoulder injury in the second half of the year. Their number 2 corner was a sophomore who played well, but was a first-year starter. Even if you project him in a starting spot, all right, well, you've got a JUCO transfer who was a top-end guy, and now you've got a top transfer. You're in a far better spot depth-wise today at corner if you're Oregon than you were at any point in the season. So that's why I say I think Alexander could find himself in that spot, but at safety, they were losing multiple seniors as well. And that's why I say Savage is probably going to have more production, but I think Alexander has a chance to be the bigger impact.
James, great stuff. It's been a while since all that realignment crazy. And then also just talking Oregon football. We appreciate your time. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll watch this college football every day. Something happens as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
James Crepea, the Oregonian.